What's the most awkward accidental physical contact you've had with the opposite sex? I was walking through a hallway at work, where a guy and girl I've never met were talking. As I got closer, the guy held out his arms in a "come on through" motion, but instead, I hugged him. Afterward, I didn't know what to do, so I just kept walking. I've never seen that guy again. I was in a wedding reception line, and hugged my buddy who was just got married, then hugged and kissed his new bride on the cheek and then moved on to, apparently, the maid of honor, who I had never met. In the rhythm of the moment, I reached to hug her, too, then was about to kiss her cheek, when got the instinctual impulse that this was too far for a complete stranger, so, I guess to not look I was performing a head fake on her. I instead bent my head and kissed her on the neck, right above her bare shoulder. I was walking through the city in August, the peak of business. The population more than doubles and the pavements are absolutely packed with tourists. I'm only 4'0" tall, I have dwarfism, and I have the advantage of being able to weave through you lanky-ass giants, so I was dodging and diving at quite a pace compared to everyone else. I noticed a woman ahead of me in the crowd, talking on her phone. She was very tall and also in 6 heels. I took a millisecond to admire her amazing figure in her tight-fitting dress before I tried to dodge past her, but she sidestepped in the same direction and stopped in her tracks completely, reacting to the conversation on the phone I'm assuming. I face-planted right into her ass with some force. She whirled around and screamed at me in horror, a reasonable reaction I think. I felt my face flush red, mortified. I blurted out a "sorry" and swiftly darted away into the crowd again before she could do any more, like slap me. Eating lunch with co-workers at Twin Peaks. Cute waitress gets high fives from all of us for some reason. Just as I go in for mine, someone calls her name, and she turns her head or shoulders and lowers her hand. There was no time to stop, I was already in motion. I high-fived her right in the boob. In front of my boss and co-workers. The look she gave me, she knew it was an accident, but that still didn't make it any less awkward for her and I the rest of the meal. While fooling around with my soon-to-be wife I tried to passionately throw her onto her back. She was on top, I misjudged the width of the bed and absolutely power-bombed her head into the nightstand. I'm sure this has happened to some people on here, but I was in a store snuck up on my girlfriend's sister and hit her with a boat paddle as petty revenge for hitting me with a broom earlier. Right on her butt, we were young and dumb. As I muttered something clever like, "How do you like DEM apples?" She turned around and it turned out to be a lady in her 40s wearing the same jeans and pink shirt combo. I apologized thoroughly and explained myself and she was okay with it only because I basically told her she looked like a teenager from the back, in so many words. And no, my girlfriend and her sister just watched it all and offered no help or confirmation of the same outfit from behind another aisle. In high school, there was a girl who I had a crush on. I'm pretty sure the crush was mutual and we were doing that thing where we were hanging out a lot and talking a lot, but no one was making a move. Anyway, we went to a restaurant with a group of friends and she was sitting next to me. All of a sudden she was leaning over so her head was almost in my lap. I just kind of froze and thought she was doing some weird gesture of affection. She suddenly said, "Could you move?" I dropped something. I said, "Oh," and then she said, "Oh, you thought." Brief awkwardness where I worried she thought I thought she was going for a BJ in the middle of a restaurant. Anyway, we're still good friends. Was on an unusually crowded subway, backed up against one of the partition walls. Hot girl squeezes in at the next stop, and full-on backs her yoga panted but right into my crotch. I had nowhere to go, couldn't decide whether I should say something or not. Also couldn't decide whether it'd be ruder to have a boner or not. My stop was only 3 stops away, but those were the most pleasant 3 stops I've ever had on a subway. Oh, that's easy. Went to see a friend's play. That coincidentally had her getting naked on stage, which was a complete surprise to me, though I wasn't complaining. I went to congratulate her after the show, went in for a hug and accidentally got like a full-on handful of boob. And neither of us said anything and acted like it didn't happen, like you do. I was mortified though. Walking through a haunted house on a field trip in high school and one of my cute classmates, who I barely knew, freaked out, and jumped into my arms. I was startled but caught her and also caught a handful of boob. Now I was the freaked one, but she was so scared I tried to let her go, but she hung on to me like a sloth the rest of the way through. I put her down at the end, gave her a nod and stumbled away. I think we talked like twice the rest of our high school careers. This happened a few weeks ago. I was swimming at the beach in rather dark water with my friends. I have this one friend who likes to do a lot of gay shit like pull pants down, grab your dick, tickle your balls, try to shove his leg up your ass, etc. We are splishing and splashing about when all of a sudden I felt what felt like a knee going up my ass. So I of course am trying to fart on it, so I start holding down and pushing closer to whatever was trying to go up my butt. I then felt long hair where my smile turns into a face as I see a 12-year-old girl pop out of the water. She looks at me, coughs a few times because her face was just up my ass, and then swims away. I was 12, maybe 13. At Crush's house, crushing hard. She had a basketball hoop and asked if I play. Devilish grin creeps onto my face. Instantly took up guard. She fakes left. Runs right. She's too slow. Puts up shot in front of me like I'm some kinda bitch. Duck that. I swat the ball like a recruiter, my mother, and Jesus was there watching. She tries holding on to ball. Big mistake. She falls. Hard. I fall on top of her. Harder. Bruised her rib. Bloody knees and elbows. She doesn't talk to me all the way up till senior year and tells every girl in school. Still undefeated. Senior trip in high school, seated next to my crush on the bus. We'd already been up all night and were on our way to destination #2 when I fell asleep. I woke up when we got there only to discover that I'd awoken with raging 17-year-old morning wood. Worse, I was wearing loose-fitting surfer shorts, so there was no concealing what was going on. Worse, she got up to get off the bus in front of me, meaning I would be standing right behind her in close proximity. So there I am, standing a couple of inches behind my high school crush, with a very prominent erection completely uninhibited by any form of restrictive clothing, inignorably thwacking against her behind, trying to act casual as we file off the bus. Just yesterday we were doing a group photo for an intern whose last day is today. It was just the 4 people sit by him. The office hot MILF spilled something on her blouse and there was a big wet spot on the boob region of her shirt. She said, "I'll have to stand like this to hide it." She turned sideways and pushed her boob into my arm. It was a good day. I was on a streetcar and was kinda spaced out listening to music, and a woman came plopped down in the seat next me. To my horror, my hand was resting in that seat unknowingly, and she jumped up and gave me a death stare and moved to another open seat away from me. A few other people were giving me dirty looks. I just got off at the next stop to end my public embarrassment. Saying goodbye to a friend of mine after they graduated. Went in for a hug, but our faces went in the same way and we kissed. Then tried to do it again and faces went the same way that time too. We kept fumbling before getting it right and having a normal friendly hug. I think we were both too stubborn to give up, but it only made it worse. We had and would continue to have zero attraction to each other. I once saw a longtime friend in the hall at school. We, of course, ran to each other like in the movies for a glorious hug. One of my female classmates was terrified, standing in the middle of 2-6 Judes running at each other. We grabbed her for the hug, but I accidentally grabbed her boob. This was the day she didn't wear a bra. Worked in a restaurant and had a super bitchy manager. One night, she slipped on a greasy floor and would have fallen down 25 metal steps, but I was able to reach out and grab her, possibly saving her life and definitely saving her from broken bones. She thanked me and laughed. My hands were squeezing both of her breasts and holding on like both our lives depended on it. She was a lot nicer to work with after that. I went to high school with my cousin. We were at a high school dance or some sort of event and I spotted my cousin across the gymnasium. I snuck up behind her, picked her up around the waist and ran across the gym with her just to shake things up a little bit. After I put her down, I realized she was not my cousin and I did not know her. I was on the tube once, when this attractive woman was moving towards the exit to get off at the next stop. When the train suddenly lurched to a stop. She lost her balance, and I reached out to stop her falling into me. Unfortunately, this involved me accidentally grabbing her breast. Was at the doctor's office, being examined by a cute resident about my age who was clearly nervous about physical contact. She kept asking consent for anything involving contact, including things like taking my pulse and using a stethoscope. Then at one point, as I'm sitting on the table with my hand on the corner, she leans over toward me to check my ear, and her crotch is resting on my hand. As in, my knuckle is fully in her camel toe. I didn't move or say anything in order to avoid making things more awkward, and pretended not to notice. I think she was pretending not to notice too. I was walking behind a girl I liked in a small, scattered group of friends after a school assembly. I was trying to walk closer to her, and I don't know if I twitched or what the duck went wrong with me, but my arm extended enough to smack her ass. I knew her enough so that I could have admitted it was me and laughed it off, but I thought it would be better to act oblivious. I was at this point the only person behind her close enough to smack her ass, so it was obviously me. I'm sure she thought I was a ducking creep. Playing a game called Ninja, where you try to slap each other's hands. Accidentally slapped a friend right on the boob. That was about 8 years ago, and last month we celebrated our 3rd year dating. So I guess it paid off. I was sitting in a bus, by the aisle, talking to the person on the seat in front of me and gesticulating a lot. Girl wearing a sundress walks by me right as I move my aisle side hand upwards, catching the dress and lifting it way up. So, technically no contact with her, but still very embarrassing. And I didn't even see what happened because I was looking forward and she was very quick to pull it back down. Finally, I've got a good one. I was about 12 to 13, already an awkward time for everyone. For a couple of years I had been working at a local theatre company, a volunteer organization of people of all ages. After a couple of shows there, I changed grades in school, and one of the actresses, a woman of about 28, someone I was on a first-name basis with, my brother is about the same age at this time, so I was used to being around much older peers, was now my middle school theatre teacher. Awesome, I've got a teacher that's also like an adult friend to me. So one show, we're all crammed backstage waiting for our cue for the chorus to spill on stage and sing and whatnot. While we're back there, we're packed in like sardines. All of us in there, and she is facing towards my side. She asked some kind of question, and not having an answer and trying to stay quiet, I just replied with a little shrug, the kind where my hands barely leave my sides. Well, that distance my hand traveled was just enough to oh so delicately graze her legging-type costume pants right along the curve of her vagina. She froze, eyes popping open to gigantic proportion. I was mortified, too pubescent to be able to react at all, let alone apologize or react appropriately. All this in just enough time for our cue for all of us to go sing and dance our hearts out, while pretending I didn't just accidentally graze my much older friend turned new teacher's mound of Venus. She never said anything, I couldn't bring myself to either. A sufficiently awkward experience for an awkward age. Then I got to see her every day at school. Yay. 7th grade was walking down the hall during a class change and a girl I ended up dating 3 years later was walking in front of me. She suddenly stopped and whirled around. I put up both hands to keep us from bumping into each other and, accidentally, I swear, they were in the exact position to, well, cup each of her breasts. In the nanosecond I was touching her, our eyes met. We both did a 180 and quickly walked away me in the wrong direction. We started dating in HS and we admitted to each other that experience fueled many nightly masturbation sessions. We were drunk and getting ready for bed. I was watching a video on my phone and laughing, and my friend's girlfriend came over to watch. She had no pants on, just underwear, and she kind of sat or half laid down onto the couch with me. Friend was not the type to care and this was fairly normal for us. This got me a bit worked up because I was drunk and she was stunningly gorgeous. When she got up though, she lost balance and fell backward. Literally right onto my penis. I felt it stabbing her butt. It hurt. Her eyes widened and she just stammered out a sorry and rushed off. I just couldn't believe how cartoonish it was, literally almost had accidental Shreks. It's my turn to shine. I was rehearsing a piece with a girl and I was supposed to lift her up with her hip as the base. Well, I wasn't underneath her enough and she slipped and I grabbed her as best I could to softly lower her. Unfortunately, my hand slipped underneath the leg hole of her leotard and I grazed her bare vegu with my pinky. Like if she was falling any faster I would have fingered her. After she was standing, we both just stepped away awkwardly. I apologized profusely and went and washed my hands and we called it a day. That lift was changed next rehearsal. To this day that's the closest I've been to a vagina as a gay man. I was walking with my boss and we were chatting away. We were on a street and I moved slightly behind him to allow someone to pass going the opposite direction. I didn't move immediately then next to him for some reason, and as he turned out to speak to me, he swung his hands. He swung his hands straight into my crotch. He fanny slapped me basically. I don't know who laughed harder, me or the guy walking past at the time who witnessed the whole thing. Was on a late flight going from San Diego to Cincinnati back in 2007 or 2008. I was in the middle seat. Very attractive 20-something girl was sitting in the window seat. We make the standard small talk for a few minutes. I end up falling asleep for a little bit, wake up and she's snuggled up on me sound asleep. Like mouth open, drooling, hand on my lap, head on my chest, sound asleep. Basically how your wife or girlfriend would sleep on you if you were on a plane. Very intimate considering we didn't know each other. I felt bad because she was sleeping and I didn't want to wake her by shoving her off of me, so I just sat there for 2 hours trying to be as still as possible while thinking of how awkward it is going to be when she wakes up. Luckily she was a good sport and just laughed it off and apologized. We chatted the rest of the flight and she gave me her number and said if I ever wanted to see more of Cincinnati. I recently got based in Cincy and didn't know the city well, or to grab a couple drinks to give her a call. I was newlywed to my future ex-wife and never took her up on her offer. Every now and then I wonder how she's doing. I did a hospitality course a few years ago, and we had to do a training weekend at a fine dining restaurant. As I was walking out of the pantry during a busy lunch service, another student and I bumped into each other. With the way her hand was swaying, it landed right as a perfect cup around my cock and balls. We both just froze for a few seconds, hands still there, processing what was happening, which only amped up the awkwardness. She let out a shocked yelp, looking absolutely aghast, and we swiftly walked on. Bonus awkward points: she was from a very conservative background in China, and I suspect that was the first time she had ever touched a penis. Oops. I went shopping with my girlfriend and I'm staring at the wall of headphones in front of my just browsing, and my girlfriend walks up next to me, says, "Hey look, I found this cool thing." Can't remember what it was. I reply something like "Nice babe," put my arm around her and pull her close. She responds by putting her arm around me and kinda side hugs me. Turns out this girl isn't my girlfriend. We looked at each other in utter awkwardness and both say, "Oh, sorry." Let go and walk away. This happened at a party this last the 4th of July. My girlfriend had been sitting in the same seat for around half an hour, as we were there early and just chatting on the counter. I go to grab a drink and come back to stand on the left of my girlfriend. I immediately reached my hand around her waist and rested it on her hip. A few seconds later, I start slipping my hand down her waistband, both waistbands. Without thought, of course, I just like resting my hand on her hip. Then the group gets really silent and I realize that my girlfriend was staring at me from the other side of the kitchen island. I look down to my right and my friend just looks at me with her mouth open. I look back at my girlfriend. She's laughing her ass off as I slowly comprehend. My friend is still shocked and hasn't said anything. She looked both scared and embarrassed as I slowly took my hand out of her panties and shamefully scooted away, trying and failing to get a coherent apology out of my mouth. I was standing in a crowded bus holding onto one of the overhead handles, and there was a woman trying to make her way to the back. As she was inching past me, the bus driver braked suddenly for some reason, which caused me to thrust my crotch against her ass. I was wearing basketball shorts, so there wasn't much between her and my garbage. She was noticeably taken aback. I shared this before, but I was at a car boot sale in Cheddar with my mum and my partner. We were looking at stuff and I let go of his hand to get closer. There was a small crowd around the table, and when I stepped back, I saw my partner out of the corner of my eye, so without turning I reached back and slipped my fingers between his. I hear a stranger with an accent say, trying to hold my hand. They weren't his fingers. I thought they were softer than normal. I jumped and pulled my hand away, and apologized as I looked around for my partner. My partner walked over from the other end of the table, laughing, and said, I knew what was going to happen and I just had to see. We all laughed and I apologized again. Then we walked away as fast as possible. What made it worse is I was, a pasty fat girl and he was a hot Mediterranean guy. Telling the story of another that I witnessed, but it's fitting. When I was in high school, one of the teachers was a younger, mid-20s, guy who was friendly with the students, good guy. He was also particularly short, about 5'3". He was walking on the stairs in front of me and was right behind a girl in my grade who happened to be particularly tall, maybe 5'9". He went to tap her on the shoulder or arm to say hello, but because of the height difference and her walking of the stairs a little faster than him, when he reached out, she moved higher up the stairs, and he tapped her right on the ass. The look between the two of them when she turned around was absolutely hilarious. Fortunately, she knew him well enough to know it was an accident and he wasn't a sexual harasser of any kind, but I'm sure he thought for a moment he was about to lose his job.